stoked to spectate. I got the full ultra wide res going.
You're gonna be like, you're gonna be like, oh my god, the raid on the side. I'm like, what? Where?
Don't even
You
have to
can be like on the
scroll.
corner of the map, on the corner of the map.
That's like I've always thought that that would be so cool. Do you guys
Ahura
remember
Mazda bless you.
I'm pretty sure the original Microsoft Surface? It's like
Mm,
like not the laptops, like and I'm pretty sure it was called Surface. It was like that big ass touchscreen table. Do you
table.
remember what I'm talking about?
Holy shit,
I
no.
don't think it ever was like a consumer thing. Maybe someone in the chat tell me if I'm crazy or imagining this, but I swear it was called the Surface, and it was like this giant table essentially, and it was like a touchscreen table. Am I crazy? Maybe I'll Google this, but like I always thought like how cool something like that would be for RTS. You know, basically like
This thing?
you you see the entire map always. You know, there's no like scrolling. You know what I mean? Like you would just like play on this like giant battlefield. You know, I don't know. I always thought that that would be something that would be really cool. I gotta look this up to see if that was like a fever dream or if
I'm looking at it now. It seems like a coffee table sort of situation. The Microsoft Surface is like literally like a coffee table.
yeah, 2008. Dang. And now, you know,
Oh
obviously
yeah, yeah.
Surfaces are the laptops and whatnot. But yeah, this was like, I don't think this ever became like a consumer product as far as I know. Maybe this was just like a tech demo or something. But yeah, I always thought something like this, although, you know, our frickin' like iPhone probably has a higher res than this does now, you know. But like, yeah, I always thought this would be cool for like a RTS application, like some huge strategy game.
It would be. It definitely would be. Um,
Or even like VR or something, you know, instead of scrolling, you just kind of like look around. I don't know. I don't
yeah,
even remember where that thought came from. But oh, the ultra wide, I guess. But that was
but yeah, your ultra is that not just better than the table?
I guess, yeah. You know, you still have to scroll a little bit, just a little, just less. But just like some kind of you know some kind of scenario where you just see the entire battlefield always, you know, like without scrolling. Still fog of war and whatnot, I guess. But like, I don't really know how that would work.
Are there any games you particularly like playing on your
Oh,
big ass setup?
Civ is amazing. Really, all games look good, but Civ for sure.
Oh yeah, you can see all of your the map, eh? Uh,
Age and Civ and StarCraft are like the three that are on the same tier for me. My like tier S favorite of all time games. I love a good game of Civ, aka a few days of my life, you know, because they take so long.
yeah, I've played Civ only a couple times, but yeah, it's been
Oh man, any
there's a
strategy
long
game.
games.
Yeah, they are. They are. Highly recommend.
Um, so Greek is around, but Eshwar, I think we're just waiting for him. Be around shortly.
Civ is just a game of Age of Empires over, you know, a couple of millennia in game time and tens of hours in real game time, you know.
Yeah. Does anybody know? I know client is limited. Would it be possible to add a random legendary quest queue and you choose the value? I'm not sure what that means.
Sounds like a PF2K question. He knows
Yeah,
everything.
sounds like a PF2K question. Eshwa, where are you at? Greeky, I'm trying to invite you.
Missed, did he still play StarCraft much anymore?
No, I don't play any other games. I
Nice.
actually came back after like not playing for like 2 years. I played some Age of Empires 2D, but that's about it.
Nice, nice, nice.
Just focusing on work, Missa?
Yep. Farming, and I also work in a cotton factory.
That's crazy. It's like, oh yeah, pro gamer turns cotton factory supervisor. You
I
know,
guess somebody's got to work hard while we just play games, you know.
I still play games, you
Somebody's
see.
gotta do it.
I still got this. Not as much, but I still got it.
Oh yeah, I see. I just saw
yep.
in that VOD. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I think you play maybe 100 matches, and then, boom, um, you get back on it. So Saint Benny says, Mister, what do you think of the Roman Civ in general?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
I think they're unique. They're really, really fun. They have a lot of unique features that you need to get used to using, and lots of strategies. I think they're slightly stronger than some civs, but then again, you have Kelts, you have Babylon, so it's only unfair to the next civs like Greeks, for example, Persia, Egyptians, Norse. I just think Scorpios are really, really strong. That's about it. If as soon as Scorpios are fixed, then it should be good. Good
I
start.
I also think that the other than Scorpios, I think what is it? The Presidium upgrade that gives your barracks like extra health and they can shoot. Um, I think if that is like lowers the amount of health that they get extra instead of like 50% extra health, that might make it a bit more reasonable.
I don't know. It's the fact that I'm allowed to make barracks on the sides. It should mean that I can do it. Like you can also make barracks, normal barracks on the sides, and make like if he comes to gather, just make like 3 hypas. You still make like, for example, 4 axeman. It's not cheap to start making barracks. Like 200 wood, 200 wood. Like I found out that Romans are one of the most wood heavy civs in the game. You're not making units with wood. Like I don't make units with wood. Like
Mm.
if you noticed, I rarely make bowman or skirms or slingers, and
Yeah,
I always lack wood. Even though I have like the most villagers on wood, I always lack wood with Romans because it's doing this is really wood intensive.
yeah, that makes sense though because you have to spend 200 resources for or 200 wood for each one of those 5 barracks you're gonna put down on each side, right? That's
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 basically the
2,000
age
wood
for
each.
wood.
Yeah.
That's age for wood, and I always don't have the wood to go age 4 with Romans. I have the food, I have the gold, I have the stone, but I don't have the wood.
Do you think it's because you overestimate or underestimate the amount of wood you need?
Just like I value like if I find the opportunity to get the site with barracks, I start making barracks until I can't make more. So I think it's like
Mm.
you give me a foothold, I'm gonna abuse it. I might delay my age for a bit, but I will secure a side which will give me extra gold, extra stone, and that means that not only I will get more gold and stone, it means that you won't get it, which is more important.
Okay, I have messaged Eshwar's brother to message him.
Nice. Hey, do what you do as the TO, you know.
Yep, we're hopefully he's messaging him on WhatsApp, and then he will come online. I think he didn't expect the game or Madlib to forfeit the series. So
Oh, sure, sure. Hey, shout out to your incredible tournament organization, Star, and consistently. I know it's tough and a ton of work and commitment, so thanks for doing it, man.
well, Steve, I think it was Bullet who asked, like, well, why do you do it? And I'm sure like the same question, um, like why do you like the game? Do you like? It's a lot of fun, and I gotta be honest, you've definitely inspired me, um, to put these sorts of things together. It's the game I love, the community I love, um, and yeah, like so if I can help out, fuck yeah, I'm gonna do it. Um, so yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
I love to hear it. Yeah, I got paid to do it at least, you know. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's the community that does it. That's way more impressive in my opinion. So huge props, man. And hey, if you're ever, I mean, this goes for you and anybody else. You know, if you're ever looking to work in games or applying for jobs in the industry, regardless of position, like make sure you include this type of stuff on your resume or in your cover letter at least. Like again, regardless of what the role is, but
Mm-hmm.
if it's anything to do with gaming, you know, game dev, community, whatever, like this is very valid experience or showing your level of involvement and commitment to a game that you love and you're passionate about. You know, whether it's organizing a tournament or making user generated content like mods for the Steam Workshop or whatever it is. It's very applicable, and hiring managers in games love this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's
So
a
make
real
sure
life
to
tip.
for sure, yeah. So if anybody, if you're fortunate enough to, or if you want to work in gaming and you're fortunate enough to get an interview or something, absolutely include your level of involvement and stuff that you do for the community and whatnot. It's super relevant.
Is that part of um, what you did to get the community manager role at Microsoft?
Sort of. I mean, my path at Microsoft was not traditional at all, like I didn't go to school or anything even. But I mean, how it worked out for me was I got hired to be on the balance team, right? Which was uh that whole interview and that process was pretty funny in itself, but like it's actually pretty much exactly a year in. I worked from like October 2011 to October 2012, but like at the end of that time, we learned about Age Online was going to be, they call it sunsetting, right? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like at first it's no new content is being created for it, and eventually it kind of gets turned off, right? But I got
Wait,
very
wow. So they
very
knew it
very
from all the way back then, eh? Wow, didn't know
well,
that.
I don't know if I was supposed to say that or not, but I don't know. So something around that time, right? Maybe it
Okay,
was a
okay.
decade ago. Maybe my memory's foggy. But but I got very fortunate in that I got asked by because there was still a community team for Age Online, right? Even after it was going to be sunset and no new content for that period, that it was still going to be playable and whatnot. Like there's still a thriving community and whatnot. So and there was a dedicated community team for it. As in like the folks doing social media for it and blogs and forums and streaming and all that. So I got lucky and I just like transitioned over to the community team. So I was a
Mm.
you know test associate or test associate 2 or whatever the title was when I was just doing the PvP game balance stuff, right? And then it was just a smooth transition over to the community team. So I lucked out. And then
Okay.
that team eventually grew. Like at the time, it was just the community team for Age of Empires Online specifically, but like, you know, shortly after is when they started bringing back the other Age games to Steam and whatnot. You know, like the
Mm.
HD edition, H2 HD edition, I think was the first like kind of foray into that. That proved to be successful, so the others followed. But like that team slowly grew into being the Age Online team, into the whole Age of Empires franchise community team. You know, because the games
Yes.
where it didn't officially like have an officially supported community team at Microsoft before, just because those games weren't very active. You know,
Yes. Yes.
but that team started to grow and became the franchise team, and then it, you know, it ended up becoming a like a big community team, like a centralized community team for other Microsoft first party titles as well. Games like you know, I think it's called Xbox Game Studios now, right? It's like that big
Yes.
first party studio, but at the time it was Microsoft Game Studios, and we were the centralized community team for games that basically weren't the monster first party Microsoft IPs, like, you know, Gears of War
Halo.
and Halo and Forza. Like they would have their own, like the way that community worked for those titles is they were like they worked for the studios and they were embedded with the dev team and whatnot. So this centralized community team that included Age were like community managers all working on the same team together. You know, we called it a centralized resource that handled community for other active games that like weren't these monoliths, right? So my
Mm-hmm.
colleagues, like, you know, you guys know Rick Hizzle or Ricari, he used to be active in Age Online, but like he represented the community for Killer Instinct, for example, right? And then we
Okay.
had folks doing, you know, Recore and Quantum Break and a lot of the Solitaire, you know,
The
a lot of the
community
other
manager
titles.
for Solitaire. Love it. Uh,
Yo, no joke. Solitaire is just like
Popping off.
is very is very successful. I'll put it that way. But like, do not
Mm.
sleep. I know it sounds funny because, like, you know, especially like to us, right? You know, we're like competitive PvP gamers, but don't sleep on Solitaire. Solitaire is unbelievably successful, like shockingly successful.
It's is it sort of like Candy Crush, where that type of player where it's still very successful, even though there's no like super competitive side of things.
Yeah, I guess so. You know, just like so many people play. I mean, it, you know, comes installed. What actually, I don't even know if it still comes installed on computers, but you know, it certainly did. Like with Windows, you know, it did at the time, and it
Mm-hmm.
has a huge, unbelievably huge player base. That was pretty cool. But yeah, you know, I was very lucky and lucked out, and you know, the team kept growing, and I was lucky to, you know, I'm lucky to still be here, and it's all thanks to Age.
I
But my ride certainly wasn't a traditional one at Microsoft, you know.
no, understandable. I always found that very interesting that it seemed like they not copied, but it seems like they took the Age of Empires Online community management model, and they really did make that into every other Sims model. And it or not every other Sim, but every other games model, or at least the rest of the Age franchise. And so it's cool to hear you actually confirm my suspicions. Um,
I think it was like, you know, like especially because this was like literally a decade ago now, right? And I think at the time, maybe still to this day, but much more so at the time, like the whole concept of community, like a community manager is like a professional role, you know, especially at a huge, enormous company like Microsoft, isn't as understood as somebody in a very traditional role, like, you know, part of the development team or,
mm-hmm.
you know, like software engineer or somebody in marketing, right? Like it's this weird, like, what is community? You know, what is the importance of social media to a global brand or a corporate brand, right? So it's a very, and I credit my manager at the time, and you know, and she's still around to this day. Like she was a champion of community and like making sure, you know, that like leadership and all, you know, higher ups like understood like why community is good and why it's important, why it deserves resources and should, you know, be
Mm.
like a real officially supported position. You know what I mean? Because like especially back then, like Twitch was way smaller, you know, for example, right?
Yep.
Like way smaller, and you know, not, I don't think like nowadays, like no matter what your brand is, you know, you could be a, I don't know, like a bread, you know, bread making company or something, and you still probably have a social media presence, right? But that wasn't as common back then, at least in my memory. But you know, I think the point, especially for games like, you know, you have players, which means you have a community and you want to support that community, and then it kind of, you know, it ties into your business objectives in a way, right?
Of
Like it was
course.
just Age of Empires Online because that was the only like officially active supported title, right? But once, you know, Steam, like the Steam releases started up, like it became that franchise team because it's like, hey, you know, we've got active players and we've got this Steam game now. We got multiple Age of Empires games, and Age of Empires is very unique in a sense that like it wasn't a new title, right? It had been around already for a decade, you know, at least a
Hmm.
decade at that time, right? The first one was what, 95 or something like that.
Yeah,
But
early 90s. But that's
and,
exactly why a community team seems so important, right? You have all these players
mhm,
who have played the game before, are interested in it potentially, but they're like they don't have might not have the motivation to play or pick it up again. But when they see the community playing it or being cultivated in that way, like um, it gets you excited as the player, and you want to play more, and you
mhm.
want to be engaged. And so I can completely see the value of a community team like that.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, like the best case scenario is like you see, you know, your friends or other people talking about it on social media or something, for example, right? And you're like, oh, hey, like I forgot about that game. You know, best case scenario, I'm gonna buy a copy and start playing, right? But even just having people talk about your game in a public forum, like, you know, again, like social, right? Like on the Facebook page or Twitter or you know, these days Twitch and streaming services, right? Like that's still a big win, you know? Like think about like ultimately you're in a way you're competing for people's time, right? Like their
Yeah.
entertainment time, I guess, in games. Like how many games are out there? You know, plus you've got like Netflix and Hulu, and you know, this is all like people's kind of entertainment time, right? And there are, you know, billions of trillions of hours you could spend playing all these different games, right? So it's, you know, it's very, if you have folks talking about your game and engaging with it or something to do with age, like that's still a win even if they're not playing, you know, because that even that has like an indirect influence on others. And you know, Twitch was just taken off. I mean, Twitch has still been around, you know, it's nothing like the monolith that they are today. It was a lot smaller, but like that, I think it was just starting to be understood, or like people are starting to figure out like what an incredible tool streaming is. And I still believe it's like the best, you know, the best, most efficient marketing out there is, or like the biggest purchase intent driver are streams, right? At least that's anecdotal, at least for me, right? Like I don't know about you guys, but like if I'm interested in a game or I hear about a game, like before I buy it, like my first thing is like I'm gonna go watch somebody actually play it,
Mm.
you know, on stream, right, on Twitch. And like, you know, because trailers are cool, you know, and traditional marketing is cool, like commercials or some CGI trailer. But it's like, yeah, that's a very curated experience, you know, as cool as they are. Like I get so hyped on any Blizzard trailer, for example, that drops, even if I don't play the game, because it's just like a freaking movie, right? But
Yeah.
like to actually just like go tune into somebody's stream and watch them actually play, you know, somebody that, at least back then, you know, it's like unbiased, you know, they're just like playing it because they want to, and you get to see the real grittiness of the game. Like it's the ultimate purchase intent.
Yes, you see them trip up like in the early stages, and you're like, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
if that seems interesting to me, then I'm gonna be interested in it. I prefer personally to go to YouTube and be like, okay, have a
Mm-hmm.
bit more curated experience where maybe somebody does first impressions of the game and
Mm-hmm.
like condenses it all. Um,
Yeah, and so, you know, same kind of thing, right? That, and that's like, you know, you basically you have that's organic, I guess, organic marketing in a way where it's like that's, you know, how much does traditional media and marketing cost? Like insane, you know, to do commercials or ad spend or whatever, right? That's like so much money. But if you just like have people playing your game on stream or making YouTube content, or these days, you know, TikTok content, and like any, you know, anything, right? Like that's just so organic and valuable and free. Although, you know,
can
it
you
was
imagine?
now like you're a big streamer and like part of your income potentially is like sponsored streams, you know? Like think, remember like when Apex launched, for
Yes.
example, like Apex Legends, like that huge marketing push, but I don't know if that money was from EA or Respawn or whatever, but like all the top streamers were playing Apex. Like how common is that now? You know, big game launching, and a lot of that budget goes towards like these big influencers that already have big audiences, and it's like, yeah, you know, play this game and show it off. Like companies are recognizing how valuable that is, right? Even non-gaming companies, you know, how many brands are or how many like content creators are sponsored by, you know, Turtle Beach or Razer, or you know, freaking like if you're Tim the Tap Man, you know, he just got sponsored by Herman Miller, you know, the chair people, like these brands, like anything related to, you know, especially gaming, but like I guess there's so many non-gaming streamers out there
Yeah, if
too. But,
AKG
like,
wants to sponsor me to wear their headphones, then I am all about it.
exactly, yeah, and then you know, you're going to tell your audience about them, and that, I don't know, that's just like, so maybe I'm heavily biased, right? And I worked in, you know, I work for Mixer. I believe in the power of streaming for, you know, community and marketing purposes and all the rest, but like that's just so powerful to me, and it's all kind of, it's all in that like very nebulous community space, you know.
Yep.
And now like,
Well,
and
actually,
this was
so
kind of,
on the Apex topic, actually,
yeah.
when I see a game being promoted, I feel a bit more weary about that game. Like, regardless of what it is, you know, if I see Apex being streamed, yes, I'll see, okay, yeah, cool, Apex is a good game or whatever. But my first impression will be, ah, this is sponsored. And sponsored usually, in my mind, doesn't have that same connotation. So I think that's why you want to have a community manager that brings organic content to the forefront rather than, you know, necessarily always having to rely on spending to get that sponsored spot on somebody's stream.
You know, and I think it's, I don't know what organization, probably the FCC would agree with you, right? Like even like sometime, I don't think this was, has always been a law, but like sometime over the past decade, I think that's required now, right? Like to have a hashtag sponsored in your tweet or stream title or whatever, if that's like a paid promotion. Like I
Mm-hmm.
remember when that like I'm pretty sure that, maybe I'm misremembering, but I'm pretty sure that became a thing like during my time as a community manager, because I remember like we had to start, even for some of the stuff we did, we had to start including like a hashtag sponsored or hashtag contest, you know, stuff like that. Like I think that's like an FCC thing where you as a content creator like have to disclose if you're being paid, because you're exactly right. I think there's a huge difference in, you know, intent or how you would talk about the game or how your audience would react. React isn't the right word, it's too early, but like, you
Like,
know, whether
interpret.
to interpret, that's a better word, yeah, like what you're, you know, what you're doing, if like if that's like an organic, like, hey, I'm checking this out just because I want to, versus like, hey, I'm being paid to do this, like that's a, it's an advertisement, you know what I mean? Which
Mm-hmm.
is still, you know, I don't think is not necessarily a bad thing,
It's
right?
not,
Like
but people
it's
have become
cool.
so wary of
Yeah.
streamers'
I-
impression when it's colored by um, the actual guise of being paid for it. Like, you're, unless you're somebody that I completely trust, and that trust is very hard to come by. Um, I take everything that is sponsored with like a heavy grain of salt.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yes, Striker, I've changed the title now, podcast
Yeah.
waiting room. Sorry about that. We're
Oh,
just waiting for Erie. No, not Erie. Eshwar to squat up. So if anybody can get a hold of Eshwar, that would be greatly appreciated. But actually, I'm very fascinated by this conversation, so I don't mind
yeah,
it
no,
completely.
I'll shut up whenever
No, not at
whenever
all.
people show up. And you know, I see dynastic. Your question about how would I like essentially pass on my ideas to developers for existing games is how I interpret that. You know, like I
That's a tough question.
it's well, I think you know it's as simple as like you could you at them on like social, right, or like post it on their Facebook page or Twitter, or you know, some a lot of the times there'll be like an actual, you know, like contact us page or something. Like I think it's really easy to, you know, as like especially for you know, like a big non-indie title, right? Like something that Microsoft puts out or NEA or Ubisoft or whatever. I think it's like easy to be like, oh, the developers are never going to see this, or I'm just like yelling into the void or whatever. And I think, and you know, honestly, for like some like mega huge title like Call of Duty or something like that might be true. You know, it's like impossible to sift through every single user comment, right? But like that's part of like the core, you know, if you're going to boil down like the role of a community manager into like one sentence or like one statement, to me, this is subjective in my opinion, right? But to me, it's like you as a community manager, you are the only role, like you are the only person or people, if you have community manager colleagues, that are the champion of the community and the liaison to like the community and your players to the rest of the development team.
Yes,
And so
yes.
like when you post something like that, like you're like let's say it's an idea that you have for a game and you post that to social, like that's the if the community manager is doing their job, they are taking that comment and like whatever other comments and feedback on the game, positive or negative, that they see on their own channels. And by that I mean, the channels that community managers are responsible for monitoring, which is, usually like social or the forums or, blog comments, YouTube comments, whatever, like all these community outlets, right? And like part of their job is to consolidate that feedback into talking points that they do pass on to the development
Mm-hmm.
team. Like that's a core competency and like probably the most important single thing that the community manager can do. And if it's a one-off comment, maybe that doesn't have as much impact. But like especially if there are, like-minded individuals, and this goes for like this is positive or negative, right? Like if there's like an issue with the game and a bunch of, uh, and it could be anything, right? Like, hey, I'm getting this error a lot, or if it's age, like, hey, this is really imbalanced or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
it's
it
part of the
feels
community
bad.
manager.
Yep.
It's part of the community manager's job to like, look for patterns like that, right? And like, hey, this is like a hot topic in a community versus like, this one person thinks that. Maybe that doesn't have as much of an impact, but it's part of their job to look out for that and report that back to the team, right? Because I think these days, depending on the team or the personality or desire for developers, like they may or may not be actively or passively monitoring those channels as well,
Usually
right?
not,
And
right? Like a developer, I don't know. Probably not if they're not that interested in the
it
game
dep-
that
you
they're
know
doing.
it depends. Like in my experience, there are many that at least passively, maybe they don't have active handles that engage with the community, but they'll at least read, and but many do, right? But I don't,
Mm.
if they may or may not see that themselves. It's part of the community manager's job to like report that back, again, positive or negative, right? Like if it's a negative thing, an issue with the game or a complaint about a system design or an imbalance or whatever. Or if it's, again, if it's something positive too, be like, hey, the community loves this. How can we do more of that? But like, I guess this is a long-winded answer to your question, Dynastic. But I think the point I'm trying to make is that I think it's easy as a player or community member to like just post something in the channel, in a channel, again, social or whatever, and think that, oh, they're never going to see this, why do I even bother? But like, you know a good community manager, like, they will see it, and it may not be ever actioned on, right? But it should at least be passed on, especially if it's a something that other members of the community think as well, if it's kind of a common theme, so you're not just shouting into the void, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, yeah, it's really a good. But that's the only issue, though. You that's an assumption that the community manager and then also the devs are they care enough about their game and the community around their game to do something about it.
Mhm.
Um, I think we're lucky in this situation to have great devs and um, devs that listen and care. So that's a good thing. Like PF2K is very active and cares a lot and listens. But and there's so many changes, like almost like too many changes. Um, yeah, Troller, jump on. This is the
Hey, what up,
podcast.
troller?
This is the Age podcast in for the Eshwar waiting room. Um, we're on the PvP casting channel section. Um,
What do you do in the community managers are useless? Well, hopefully community managers for any brand or product or whatever aren't useless. Oh, I forgot. I was like, I knew I had a follow-up point and I couldn't remember. I think part of, I guess one last part to that question by Dynastic is, this isn't always possible, but something that that I think you should try to do is like, as a community manager or partnering with your other communications people or whatever, like if there is a scenario where you have actioned on community feedback in some way, right? Like if, the community has reported a bug or an issue or, whatever, some kind of negative thing, and you as a then the development team goes and fixes that, or vice versa, they've, the community has an awesome reaction to something, and the development team has done some way to make it, bigger and better, or expand on that, right?
Mm.
I think one of the to a really good thing to do, or like a good community manager, if at all possible, will find a way to celebrate that and like let the community know. I'm not being very eloquent, sorry, it's too early, but by that I mean like, you know if you just like take that community feedback and like silently do it, I don't think it's as powerful as like that. You create a story out of that, right? Like, hey, community, you've been like so active and vocal about X, Y, or Z. You know, we've we've listened and we've done this. And
Yeah.
I think that's super important to do when possible, because I mean, I think that's just like a feel good story for the community, right? Like, hey, the
To
team,
actually
they
listen.
like they
Yep.
do read our comments, they do listen, and I think, by doing that, it's accomplishing a couple of things. Hopefully reducing some toxicity that we know can exist in gaming, right? And but more importantly, like actively encouraging your community to, continue to report that stuff or provide their feedback, and feel like they're listened to, that they're not just yelling into a void or giving up, continuing to motivate people to be active in the community and share their thoughts and whatnot. Not always possible depending on what the issue is, but I think, as a community manager, you got to look for ways to like to tell that story, which at its core is like, hey, we've listened and actioned on your feedback. It's a powerful tool.
What is relics cough cough? Where is that from?
And I guess I don't know specifically what that's about, but like and there are some unfortunate cases where, like, there are reasons, business reasons or leadership decision or whatever, to like not acknowledge something, right? Like community, if community manager, like, they could be reading comments usually this is probably going to be about something negative, some kind of negative scenario, right? Where like they could be reading stuff, and they for sure see your comments and feedback, but for whatever reason, like, are shouldn't or are being asked to not comment on it. Like there are reasons for that sometimes, business or otherwise, or guidance from PR or whatever it is, but like, it's not always necessarily on the, I'll stick up for the fellow community folks. It's not always on
Mm.
the community manager, right? Like there's might sometimes be reasons where they're not able to respond to something. And like games and development too, like there are also plenty of reasons to not be super active or vocal. Like they might be saving stuff for release, or like you don't want to interfere with marketing plans
Mm-hmm.
for announcements and whatnot. Like community is it's like a weird thing, like before a game is launched, where like your community isn't of players yet, right? Because nobody can play it. It's like just of like
It's all hype.
fans or people hyped about your game. Yeah, so it's like it can be a weird spot.
That's a
Like
quite tough spot to be in, I would say.
yeah, I don't have a ton of experience in that. Like I guess my last couple months or half a year or whatever it was before I moved on to the Mixer team, when I was still on that community team, I think by that time I was off of age, and I was like for Crackdown 3 specifically, but like, and then the game ended up getting delayed, but like we had already launched all these community channels, but like there was like very little to talk about, like very little to do, because the game wasn't out, there wasn't a whole lot to show,
Mm-hmm.
and like I couldn't, you couldn't really like announce or talk about anything because like marketing wanted to save this stuff for like bigger large scale marketing purposes. So it's like in a weird games that aren't quite out yet. It's in a weird spot. How much you can or should talk about, like what you reserve for like big announcements. Often you'll save big beats for like a Gamescom or an
Yep.
E3 or some kind of internal showcase. So it's more, I guess it's more marketing and less community at that point. But those two disciplines often
Intersect for
intersect.
sure.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Um,
for a lot of brands, social media, for example, is not really a community tool. It's just like an extension of marketing, right?
Sorry, a lot of brands, social media isn't necessarily a community tool. Yes, I agree. I agree. But then that's where you feel like the disingenuousness of
Hmm.
a corporation, and you don't get that same sort of payback or payoff that you expect. Um,
Maybe less so for games, but like I get, I don't know. I'm just thinking about other, like, going back, like other random brands that, like, just because like everybody has a social media presence. You're like whatever toothpaste or deodorant you use probably has social channels, but it's like what does a community for that look like? I don't know. I've always been in like games, so it's like hard for me to imagine what a community
for
for
Colgate
that looks like.
toothpastes, we got
And
some
like,
hardcore Colgate toothpaste lovers in the chat.
yeah, maybe there's fuck Crest, or I don't know. I don't really know what that looks like. Maybe I'm disparaging an actual like passionate Colgate toothpaste community,
I
but you know what I mean. It's like a kind of that. I guess when I was thinking of, sometimes it's more of an extension of marketing than community. That I was thinking of like stuff like that. But maybe
Yes,
I'm maybe I'm
that's how
maybe I'm
I'm
very wrong.
picturing it. No, that's how I'm
Yeah.
picturing it with like a Reddit, our Reddit channel, like r/Colgate, and it's like, okay, kids,
Hmm.
all right, team, we're gonna go into Target tonight and buy all the Colgates so that they think that Colgate is better, and they'd only stock Colgate from now on. Okay, go, like
That's right. We're gonna
like
do a
guerrilla
meetup.
tactics.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? I'm sorry if I offended any Colgate community, passionate community members or something.
All right.